Hello and welcome back to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Richie Kirwan on, and this one is a little different because he is actually in the final stages of getting his PhD published and like literally about to get it submitted. And it is something that you have heard me talk about to the cows come home on just how important it is to have significant muscle mass through your life and to get in enough protein. But the thing is, as you age, it actually becomes a lot more important. And it's usually in those later stages of life, you see people not really care so much about it. And then they blame their metabolism. And we're in a culture where we're focused so much on just the scale going down or just losing fat. But instead of focusing on purely that, we should actually really be focusing on how can we optimize our muscle mass and how can we optimize actually functioning better throughout our aging phenomenon that we kind of really have to go through, but we don't really think that far ahead. So I'm going to let Richie take it away, and he can pretty much introduce who he is just by simply the first topic we're talking about, and that is, why is muscle mass so important?
Hey, Ruby, thanks very much for having me on today. Muscle. And what's my connection with it? I am, as you said, a PhD candidate at Liverpool John Moores University, and my research is looking at the effects of muscle mass in people with cardiovascular disease, particularly people who are in something called cardiac rehab. And what we're trying to do is find out if increasing muscle mass in these people with cardiac risk, if that can help reduce their future risk of having some sort of a cardiac event. And we have a few different reasons to think that muscle might be helpful. But I suppose the first place to kind of start off with the conversation about muscle is what happens to it as we get older. And so that's kind of like a major focus of my research. It's something called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia means, literally it comes from the Greek, and it means a loss of flesh or a lack of flesh. And it is the gradual loss of muscle mass as we get older. And it happens to everybody. And I think everybody's familiar with it. We've all got like a grandparent or, an older member of the family who we've seen as we've grown older ourselves. We've seen them getting older, and we've probably seen them getting a lot smaller and a little bit shrunken. And that's usually because people lose muscle as they get older. And that loss of muscle is not just muscle size, it's also muscle function, so muscle strength. And that's actually specifically called dynapenia, which is the loss of muscle strength as we get older. And we think that's actually even more important because it's connected or associated with a lot with mortality. So somebody's risk of dying from lots of different causes increases with their loss of muscle strength and with their loss of muscle mass as well. Muscle is important for a lot of reasons, and hopefully we'll get to talk about why specifically today.
That's actually something that people, especially women, I'm sure you'll touch on that as well, they need to realize that strength training is probably one of the most important things that you can do versus just doing your cardiovascular exercise, because I know I've heard you talk about it before, where as we age, we actually become a lot more efficient at our type 1 muscle fiber activity, which is that cardio kind of endurance stuff. But it's this muscle strength that not only allows us to live a longer, more fulfilling life of vitality, but it's that type 2 muscle fiber, the one that actually produces force, the one that goes through that strength training work that helps along with this process. So maybe you can talk about just how important it is to strength train and what we should be doing now for that. And also, I guess, bring in the importance of protein, because you can strength train all you want, but you need to actually put in the building blocks to help that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you're absolutely right with what you're saying about the type 2 muscle fibers. So we know with sarcopenia that so we generally say it's just a loss of muscle mass, but if we look a little bit more specifically at the type of muscle that we lose, we know that we preferentially lose type 2 muscle fibers. And very, very generally, and I try not to dwell on it too much because there are more than, let's say, the type 1 fibers and type 2 fibers. But very generally, if we say type 2 fibers, we're talking about fibers that generate a lot of force very, very quickly. And usually when we build muscle, we selectively grow type 2 fibers more than type 1 fibers. I'm not saying type 1 fibers don't grow, but they certainly do. But type 2 fibers grow a little bit more, and they contribute a lot more to muscle mass, but they also contribute a lot to power and strength and activities that require us to generate a lot of power. And like I said, we lose those preferentially as we get older through sarcopenia. Now, one major issue with that is, if you think of older people, one thing that happens is, or we hear about happening with older people a lot, is that they fall. And you might say, like, why do they fall so easily? And if you think about it, if you slip or if you lose your balance, what's going to happen is your muscles are going to react immediately, really, really quickly, and they're going to try and right you and prevent you from falling and hitting the ground. So in older people, their body wants to do that, but because their type 2 fibers are smaller and they're not as efficient anymore, they can't generate the force that somebody needs to move and react quickly. And what you see is that older people tend to fall and hit the ground a lot more, and then we have issues with hip fractures a lot more frequently in older people as well. So to mitigate that, we need to think what causes this muscle loss. And I'll say first off, I'm a nutritionist, so nutrition is my bread and butter, and like I love talking about it, and I love talking about the benefits of good nutrition. But if I have to just say what is the main issue with muscle loss as we get older, I have to say it is inactivity. It is not moving enough. It is not doing enough exercise. And that is where we need to start if we want to prevent it in older people, most certainly. So like that's just kind of, I've been talking for a while, so I'll stop there. And if we want to kind of delve into anything, you can ask me from there.
I absolutely love that the nutrition actually is a really big component of it, but it is this inactivity. And something I do want to mention here as well is it's inactivity full stop, because as you age, walking actually provides stimulus to bone turnover, and it also facilitates muscle function. And movement is medicine, and it's not just for muscle and it's not just for bone, but it's the fascia that actually covers the muscle, because that responds to movement. So it's really important to keep that in mind as well. But because nutrition is a big element of the recovery process as well, and I guess as we age, we don't really think of filling our plates with good food, and it tends to be a lot more like pastries and sugary crap. I think it would be a really important time now to bring in why it is so important to actually focus on your nutrition, and why getting in higher protein than before is important as you age, because you have that anabolic resistance.
Absolutely, yeah, and you've nailed it on the head there. So anabolic resistance is a big deal in older people. So for anybody who's not familiar, anabolic resistance is a dulled reaction to what we call anabolic stimuli. So the two main anabolic stimuli that we have in our body, and when I say anabolic stimuli, they're something that causes our body to build muscle. And the two main anabolic stimuli that we have are exercise, which is number one, and then we have protein intake, which is number two. So in anabolic resistance, if we're anabolic resistant, we do not react as well to the same amount of exercise or the same amount of protein as a younger person. And that can lead to problems. So with anabolic resistance, just to give an example, if we're talking about protein intake, if you look at a young person and you give them, let's say 20 grams of a really, really high quality protein, so something like whey protein, that's usually enough to pretty much maximally stimulate muscle growth in one meal as you possibly can. Okay, so that, you know, you could say that you could add a little bit more, but 20 grams is a good amount. If you give that same 20-gram amount of protein to an older person, so let's say somebody in their 70s, you are not going to see near as good a stimulation of muscle growth. But if you double that intake of protein to 40 grams, then you see that that muscle growth stimulus increases almost to the same level as young people. So that's a really, really good example of what anabolic resistance is. It's basically saying that we need to get more protein into older people to stimulate muscle growth and muscle maintenance the same as younger people. Now, doing that is not always easy in older people, and like you said, as we age, like our tastes tend to change as well. But if we look at, let's say, standard food intake in a lot of countries, if you look at the US, for example, if you look at breakfast intake of protein, you're talking about usually 12 grams of protein. And that's understandable because for most people, breakfast is either cereal or toast or maybe some fruit, or, for some people, maybe just a cup of coffee. So you need to kind of look at, where's a big win for people. And like breakfast, I think, is a really, really big win that's just easy to approach and say, okay, let's try and get more protein at breakfast. And, there's a few different ways to do that. But yeah, getting more protein into older people is absolutely key for helping to increase muscle growth, assuming that they're doing training at the same time.
I laughed when you mentioned the breakfast because I'm thinking about my parents' breakfast, and it's just literally like toast with like peanut butter or toast with jam or toast with just butter. And it's like, there's no protein in that. Or it's just my mom eating like Cocoa Pops. It's actually ridiculous what we like. If you just look at the general population that aren't actively trying to improve their health, like we are, for example, what their typical day of eating looks like. And I also know you're a really big fan of Greek yogurt. And I think that if more people put like high protein, fat-free Greek yogurt into their diets, and the same with like fat-free cottage cheese, you get more bang for your buck. And I guess this can kind of lead into the whole sarcopenic obesity discussion as well, because it's touching on that protein note, please note that this is high quality protein, and milk as a protein is one of the highest quality proteins that you can get, aside from like eggs. But you also have to realize that eggs come with like half fat and protein. But yeah, sarcopenic obesity, because not only are we losing muscle mass as we age, but because we become a lot more sedentary, and as a population, we tend to eat a lot more shit and walk a lot less and not really prioritize what we should be prioritizing. It like that becomes one of the biggest causes of, I guess, accumulating fat, and why I guess it is so important. We can talk about the insulin sensitivity now and what exactly insulin sensitive is, and why this isn't just important for living a longer life. It's not just important for avoiding fall risks. This shit is so important for actually getting the physique goals we want, because it's not even just happening in the older population. Like this is happening in our 30s. This is happening in our 40s. We are so under muscled, and we are prioritizing, like I said at the start, the wrong shit. Like getting smaller on the scale, like doing all this cardio stuff. We're not prioritizing building enough muscle. We're not prioritizing eating plenty protein, plenty plants. Nutrition talk can come in here too, to actually get to our body composition goals now, to actually help us later in life.
Yeah, so like there's like you've touched on insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity there, and that is something vital as we're getting older. And there's a lot of different things that muscle itself improves. And with insulin sensitivity, just for anybody who's not familiar, anytime that we eat something that contains carbohydrates, that carbohydrate gets broken down into sugars, they go into our bloodstream, and what our blood wants to do, our body wants to do, is it wants to get that level down to a more stable level, because having high blood sugar levels isn't good long term. So what our body does is it starts pumping out insulin, and insulin brings our blood sugar back down. But in some individuals, and it can be for a lot of different reasons, but for example, some people who have a high level of body fat, they might experience insulin resistance. What happens is their body doesn't react to that insulin as well. So the body needs to pump out even more insulin to try and get the same effect. With exercise, with muscle, we see a really, really beautiful correlation between the amount of muscle mass that somebody has and their levels of insulin sensitivity. So their body reacts really well to insulin. And we'd say, why is that? And if you think about it, your muscle, because your muscles store carbohydrates, your muscles actually store glycogen. And when you eat, what happens is if you have very, very, not necessarily very large, but if you have decent levels of muscle mass and it's very high quality muscle mass, meaning you exercise regularly, when you eat some sugar, it goes into your bloodstream and it can get shunted into your muscles to be disposed of, to be taken out of the bloodstream and help maintain your blood sugar levels at a really, really stable, really, really healthy level. So that's just like one of the reasons that muscle mass is really, really important for maintaining healthy blood sugar and also for reducing somebody's risk of prediabetes and diabetes, so blood sugar control issues.
Yeah, that's actually a really important point for the diabetes as well, because a lot of people don't realize it's not just high blood sugar that we are starting to see a lot more of in our sedentary population, but even high blood pressure. Like, we aren't actually doing the things we need to do to, I guess, enhance not only our health, but make it easier to, I guess, battle not only fat gain, but reduction in the fat that we have, because we're not focusing on something that is such a low-hanging fruit, which is activity, which is building muscle, because we can only run our engine so far. Now, bringing in my traditional fitness analogy, we can only run our engine so far with cardio, but we need to build that bigger engine so that we can actually shuttle the nutrients into where they need to go, because then we can actually eat more food and we can actually tolerate a lot more carbs without our bodies responding to it in the same way. So I guess this leads to the question, how does lack of strength training, lack of building and focusing on building muscle mass, and the fact that we actually need to eat enough food to build that muscle mass, the right food. You can introduce your little nutrition spiel here because you love nutrition, because it is actually really important to eat the right food to build that muscle mass and enough of it. But if we don't do that with strength training versus doing huffy puffy cardio circuit bullshit, how it's actually making us fatter and more disposed to fat gain now and in the future.
So what I would say is we need to think of the individual. Okay, and when I'm talking about prescribing exercise to somebody, I try to start at whatever their level is. So if you're speaking about somebody who's completely sedentary, so they don't have any activity levels outside of their job or moving around the house, I would say getting somebody up and walking is an improvement. So if you can get somebody walking and that's more than they were doing previously, that's fantastic. If you can get somebody running, brilliant. If you can get somebody deciding to climb their stairs regularly during the day, fantastic. I know of like older individuals where their exercise is literally sitting in a chair and standing up from it regularly, and that helps. And obviously it's progressive from there. I think if you want to go more into it, then we could think about bodyweight exercises, which are fantastic as well, and somebody can try at home. They're not particularly scary for somebody to do. And then, you might say, okay, let's try throwing in some band work, some resistance bands where people can get a little bit more resistance. And then you might be able to coax somebody eventually into going to the gym. I wouldn't, let's say, throw aerobic or cardiovascular type exercise out completely, because so we've got some really, really nice research that looks at lifelong exercisers, and there's one particular paper, I can't remember the author right now, but they looked at lifelong endurance athletes and lifelong strength training athletes, so weightlifters. And what they found was, they also had a control group, which was lifelong sedentary individuals, or like the normal population. And what they found was that if you look at the the athlete groups, both of them, they both had higher levels of muscle mass and higher levels of muscle quality than the sedentary individuals. And that's just because they were continuously exercising all their life. So you don't need strength training to maintain some muscle mass as you get older. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think, like, without a shadow of doubt, strength training is by far one of the best things you can do. There was a difference between the two groups of athletes, of older athletes. The weightlifting athletes obviously were stronger and were able to produce more force with their muscles compared to the endurance athletes. And that's something that's important as well, because I think strength doesn't get spoken about enough when it comes to its benefits for somebody's health moving into their older years. So I do think resistance exercise is absolutely fantastic, because it helps you build that strength, it helps you build that mass. But cardio absolutely, and endurance style activity absolutely has a place as well.
Yeah, I actually do want to touch on that cardio part as well, because it's not one or the other. Yes, you actually need to prioritize, especially for the people listening to this, you do need to prioritize building muscle, and you need to put your focus into building muscle the right way through progressive strength training. But I am so glad that I'm actually seeing it more and more now on social media, that it's not fuck cardio anymore. Like, it's not that hashtag fuck cardio. And this is a really good thing, because as much as we like to say, I just lift weights faster, that is not cardio. And I did touch on it before, but I know that's not part of this conversation, and that's the high blood pressure. And it is one of the highest causes of mortality. High blood pressure is becoming one of the highest causes of that. And if we're not aerobically healthy, if we're not doing our cardio, we're not keeping our heart healthy, we increase our mortality risk. So it's not one or the other. It's, you do need to actually keep active as well, but you also need to factor in your recovery, because if you're trying to do all the strength training, then trying to run every single day, that runs into the recovery, which pretty much has the same negative benefit. If you're not eating enough protein, you're not eating enough plants to get the nutrients. So you need to actually see where you fit in along that spectrum, and not just say, oh, Ruby just said, fuck cardio, I can just do all the training. I didn't say that. And now I just told you I didn't say that. And it's not, oh, Richie said, I can just walk and sit up and down on my chair all day and I can be a badass. No, you need to actually see what's right for you and push it further down that route. This is actually a really good topic to go into hormones now as well, because as we age, our hormones do change. And we need to really, really be careful who we listen to on the internet, because people like to blame hormones for everything. But the thing is, it's not your hormones, honey. It's your lifestyle. Your hormones respond to your lifestyle. So if you have these factors in check, you can actually optimize your hormones and not have the same ramifications as the general population, who literally just does nothing and doesn't really care about building muscle. So I'll let you talk about that.
Well, so when it comes to aging, like, one of the biggest, let's say, changes in hormones that we see would be in women, obviously, because they go through the menopause. And what we see with the menopause is, if you think about it, for a woman, basically through all of her reproductive life, basically from puberty onwards, they have relatively high levels of estrogen and progesterone running through a relatively continuous cycle their entire life. But then you hit menopause and suddenly you see this massive drop in estrogen levels, especially, but also in progesterone levels too. And that has a huge amount of effects on women. One of those effects is linked to muscle mass, because a lot of people don't realize this, but estrogen is actually a very anabolic hormone. A lot of people like to think that testosterone is anabolic and estrogen is catabolic, and I don't know how that myth got started, but it's completely bogus. I was going to say something else, but it's so estrogen is really, really important for helping women to maintain muscle mass. And obviously around the time of menopause as well, you see a lot of other changes that happen in women in terms of their sleep habits can be completely disrupted. And that can be due to things like hot flashes, which affect sleep throughout their life. They can have changes in mood. That affects their ability to eat well. It affects their ability to to exercise, to make decisions to do exercise, because if you're constantly tired all the time, you're not going to want to do that. And then the lack of sleep makes it very, very difficult to build muscle as well. So I'm not the kind of person, I'm a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I can't say to somebody, go get HRT. But for, let's say, a woman who's going through menopause, I would say, speak with your doctor about potentially getting HRT, because we see a huge amount of improvements in a lot of different factors, including women's bone health, women's muscle mass, women's body fat distribution, women's sleep patterns, women's mood, just by going on HRT. Also women's cardiovascular disease risk, because this is something people don't think about, but after menopause, women's risk of cardiovascular disease increases to the same level as men. Before that, because of estrogen, women are somewhat protected from cardiovascular disease, but then the playing field gets a bit leveled afterwards. And then in men, obviously, as we get older, from our, let's say, our late 20s onwards, we start losing or producing less testosterone. And that's something that contributes to anabolic resistance. Now, there's not a huge amount that you can do to prevent that change in testosterone, but you can maintain healthy lifestyle habits. So people like to talk about testosterone boosters all the time and like all these tricks to improve your testosterone. The thing is, all of those things are simply healthy lifestyle habits that will help you maintain a relatively healthy, normal range of testosterone. So those are things like strength training can help you to maintain healthy levels. Eating well, making sure you're not deficient in certain nutrients is really, really important. So like if you're continuously dieting, your testosterone levels are going to tank. If you are deficient in certain minerals and vitamins, like if you're deficient in zinc or magnesium, if you're deficient in vitamin D, your testosterone levels are going to tank. Now, that's not saying if you already have good levels of those, if you start supplementing more, your test is going to shoot through the roof and everybody's going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. That is definitely not the case either, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm going to just put this in here as well. And that's just because you get out in the sun does not mean you have enough vitamin D. I highly recommend getting a source of vitamin D and actually taking it daily, because vitamin D has ample benefits on bone, on muscle, on all these different, like immunity. And if you're wearing, we're all wearing clothes, but if you're wearing clothes outside and covering your skin, you're not exposing enough surface area. If you're older, if you have more body fat, if you're of really pale skin or really dark skin, you're not able to absorb as much vitamin D as I don't want to say regular person, but as the next person. So you need to see where you're at, not be afraid to supplement with vitamin D, and not just vitamin D in a multivitamin, actually get the vitamin D and make sure that it comes either encapsulated in an oil gel capsule or take it with a source of fat, and supplement with magnesium. Most of the population is deficient in magnesium because of high stress levels, a lack of actually eating the right foods that contain magnesium as well. So I would say make sure you are supplementing with those two. I wouldn't really supplement with zinc, and I'm pretty sure you'd also agree with that as well. I wouldn't supplement with zinc outside of a multivitamin because toxic levels are just as bad as not having enough. But that actually was interesting. I didn't know about the CBD risk reduction with estrogen, but it's not that estrogen is bad and it's not that progesterone is bad. It's you need to have a balance of them. And I think this is important to tie into the previous conversation on how continuously dieting and trying to shrink ourselves, trying to do all this cardio excessively can actually throw our hormones off and make it harder as we age if we're not actually prioritizing our nutrition and, yes, strength training for the people listening to this.
So yeah, when it comes to, let's say, like you said there, continuous dieting, and I do think that I'm going to use the word yo-yo dieting just in this case. I do think yo-yo dieting is a major problem for some individuals, because I did a post on this a while back, but there was a study that had a look at individuals who regularly yo-yo diet, and it looked at their levels of muscle mass, and it found that their levels of muscle mass were considerably lower than the standard population. And there's a good reason for that. So when most people lose weight, let's assume that they don't do any form of resistance exercise. The thing is, we know that resistance exercise is incredibly protective of muscle mass. So if somebody is dieting, I would always say, please do resistance exercise. It's going to make sure that as you're losing weight, you're losing more body fat and you're holding on to more muscle. But in the general population, people, they go on fad diets, they lose a load of weight really, really quickly. But a lot of people don't realize that when we lose weight without doing any resistance exercise, about 50% of the weight that we lose can be muscle mass in some cases. And what happens then is those people, they'll go off the diet, they'll regain weight, and they'll regain that weight preferentially as body fat because they're probably not doing any exercise to stimulate muscle growth. And then at some point, maybe a year later, they'll go on another fad diet, and they'll lose some more muscle mass and they'll lose some more body fat, and then they'll regain some body fat and they won't regain the muscle mass. So we've got this terrible, almost vicious cycle where people are losing muscle mass continuously and then eventually regaining body fat. So we're getting into a state where we're getting to almost a sarcopenic obese state, where we have people losing muscle mass, the sarcopenia, and we've got the obesity, the increase in muscle mass. And that's not a good combination for people. And then it's just another perfect example of why strength training, resistance exercise is so important. It's not just for building muscle, it's for maintaining your muscle and maintaining your health and your body function, metabolic function, and good metabolic health as you age.
This is actually the part that I feel most people need to hear, because sadly, a lot of people listening to this have been through the yo-yo cycles, and a lot of people that follow me and a lot of the conversations I've been having on Instagram lately are from those yo-yo dieters. They are from people trying to eat so clean and then they binge eat on like treats and stuff. And it's this cycle of binge restrict, yo-yoing, and it is ruining, I don't like saying ruining your metabolism because your metabolism is adaptive, but it is ruining your adaptive metabolism. And that's the sarcopenic obesity that I feel like everyone needs to understand the complexity of it, but also how simple it is to avoid it. So maybe you can just touch on that a little bit more, and what you would say as, I guess, the low-hanging fruit to avoid such a thing.
Okay, so to the low-hanging fruit when it comes to sarcopenia and sarcopenic obesity to a certain extent is exercise. It always is, and it always will be. It is by far the most important thing that people need to do. If somebody is, like I said, going from a sedentary place where they've never exercised before, and they're like, what do I do? Walk, do it. And then from there, I'm like, find something that you enjoy. And the reason I say that is because most people, not everybody is going to be a dedicated, or fitness obsessed in life. It's very, very easy for those of us who work in the industry to, like we probably exercise quite regularly. We probably eat relatively well. It's very easy for us to think, okay, well, this is my normal life. Why can't other people do that? But not everybody can or wants to. So it's very important to find something that people enjoy. So for example, if you're working with somebody and they say, what do you like? It's like, I like basketball. Okay, fantastic. Can we get you to play a basketball game a couple of days a week? What do you like? I like dancing. Fantastic. Can we get you to a dance class? That'd be really great. That's great social interaction for you as well. What about swimming? All of these different things. Now, you can always encourage people to get to the gym, but I think you have to start with the easy stuff first. And the easy stuff is always going to be the enjoyable stuff, because it's stuff people will, they'll do their class and they'll be like, oh, I can't wait for the next class next week. So we start there. And then we eventually progress to getting them lifting weights, which would be fantastic if we can do that. And then with that, it's like, start easy as well. Start with just a couple of days a week and just start with a really, really basic program, and it might be just like 4 movements, go in there, do, 3 sets of like 8 to 12, like really, really basic, get them liking it. And then it's a matter of like, how do I get them to like it? And the way I do that with my clients is I gamify it. And I gamify it by making them record like their weights that they've lifted, and then I show them, okay, so this is what you did when you started your program, and now 3 months in, look at how much weight you're lifting, look at the reps that you're doing, look at how many sets you're doing. And people look at that and they're like, oh wow, yeah, okay, next week I'm going to see if I can lift even more. Obviously, without breaking themselves. So that's the low-hanging fruit there. Then on the nutrition side, we have to look at, okay, getting in more protein. How do we do that? Like I said, breakfast is a super easy place to try and get that in. Get people to have, like you said, lower fat dairy products are a great source of protein, especially for, let's say, older people who may not be able to eat as many calories and they want basically a higher protein, lower calorie source. That would be, something like low fat dairy would be fine. And you don't want to say, okay, how are we going to do that? You mentioned Greek yogurt. That's fantastic. You could get them. I think yogurts are fantastic in general, just because it's a really high quality protein, but it's also something people recognize. Because if you say to an older person, okay, I want you to take a protein shake in the mornings, a protein what? Is what the response is going to be. Nobody wants to do anything weird. But if you give somebody a yogurt, and I don't know about in Australia, but here in the UK and in Ireland at the moment, you can get protein yogurts and protein puddings everywhere. It's fantastic. So like giving somebody one of those, it's tasty, it's easy, it's quick. It's like you take it out of the fridge, you eat it, you're done. Great. Then lunch, okay, lunch is, if we look at the US as an example, average protein intake in the US is about 20 grams, a little bit less. What can you do with that? Just add, again, you could add a protein yogurt. You could add like a little Baby Bell cheese. I don't know if you have those in Australia, but they're like, okay, you got little mini cheeses that you can have. You might just say, oh yeah, I want to have a few extra slices of chicken in my sandwich. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with this. And then you think, okay, maybe I could introduce another meal at some point during the day. Okay, like maybe after dinner, I could have like, a late meal with just a little bit of protein, maybe some fruit, some berries, something like that. Something, again, easy to do, easy to manage, something that looks normal and something that's enjoyable. And then if we go a little bit deeper, and if we get into the supplement side of things, I would say that I would recommend, and I recommend it to virtually everybody now, even not even to athletes. I recommend it to older people, younger people, men, women, children, creatine. And I think it is something that a lot of people can really, really benefit from. One, because so as we get older, creatine levels tend to decline. Creatine in our muscles, just for anybody who's not familiar with it, it helps us to generate force in our muscles, and it keeps our muscles quite strong. So just taking creatine on its own, even without any resistance exercise, can help older people be stronger a little bit, not significantly, but a little bit stronger. It can also help prevent falls. Just taking creatine, because it helps people to generate force quicker. And like I mentioned earlier, when you fall, you need to generate that force quickly to stop yourself from falling over, to move your body in a way to keep yourself from falling. But on top of that, especially with older people, we know that creatine has benefits for cognitive function, so for brain health. And we see that as people get older, you tend to see a decline in cognitive power. But taking creatine can actually boost cognitive performance, people's ability to do difficult tasks with their mind. And the reason for that is so creatine works by helping us to regenerate something called ATP in our muscles. So ATP, a lot of people will have heard of this from like their high school biology. ATP is the energy currency of the cell. That's the phrase that's used in every biology textbook in the English language, I think. And when we're exercising a lot, we need to use ATP. And when we use it, creatine regenerates it back into ATP. And the more creatine we have, if our muscles are saturated, we can keep generating ATP, we can generate a lot of power. But people don't realize that our brain is an incredibly power-hungry organ, and it goes through ATP in an incredible amount. So having more creatine in your brain helps you to perform cognitive tasks, which are very, very energy heavy, much better. So yeah, that would be another recommendation besides the protein and exercise.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that before me, because creatine, it's not something I usually force upon people. It's just like, hey, creatine's really good for you, you should take it. But I feel like a lot of people do actually think it's only for the sporting industry, but it goes beyond the sports. Like I got my protein one with the flavoring in it for my parents, and I'm like, yeah, take this, you can have it as your cordial. And it's so easy to just put into their water. And I gave them like because we have like Diet Right cordial, I gave them like my Diet Right bottles, because even hydration is something that you forget as you age. And that's something that I noticed in my parents as well. They used to only drink one little 500 ml bottle, and now it's actually, no, you need to drink, your muscles need hydration, your body needs hydration. So it's like getting creatine, if you can get it flavored in a way that's good. My protein has that. Or even just I recommend just getting plain creatine monohydrate, adding it to some diet cordial, adding it to some pretty much sugar-free flavored water flavoring, I was meant to say. And that not only gets you the creatine, but it is like, hey, you need to actually drink. It's a reminder for that. But something you spoke about, which I really loved as well, is that is why, instead of just focusing about just the scale going down, which I'm going to keep harping on about, maybe you should actually put that focus into how's your training going? Gamify it, like log your weights, write down in under every exercise. I do this too with my clients. I try to do it all the time, and I keep pushing it. It's just sometimes there's a mental resistance because you're so used to just focusing on what you used to focus on before. But once you start to hone into how you feel throughout whatever exercise it is, oh, this actually feels better now. Oh, I can actually get through this now. Oh, I'm stronger now. I did 5 rounds, not 3 rounds. Like actually writing that stuff down and rewarding that effort, actually putting in the effort to talk about that training. It is such a stimulus for moving in the right direction and focusing on the right things. And the fat loss is a byproduct. Moving away from sarcopenic obesity is a byproduct. Moving towards the body composition, like think of sarcopenic obesity as the complete opposite end of the spectrum as the body that you want, because you want more muscle mass and you want less body fat. Sarcopenic obesity is less muscle mass, more body fat. So if you do the things that Richie just mentioned, you will move closer and closer towards the body that you want. And that includes not yo-yo dieting. That includes prioritizing protein and weights when you're dieting and when you're not dieting. Like you need to go through phases of, okay, I'm in a diet now. Okay, I'm not in a diet now, and spend more time there, because you can't really build muscle mass in a diet. You might be able to maintain it if you diet smart, but you can't really build it if you're not a novice / newbie. And you also mentioned it's not just what you do in the gym or in the exercise itself, it's what you do outside of it, going for walks, staying active. That stuff is important, because you can do all that you want inside that hour session of exercise. You're still sedentary if you're sitting on your ass all day. So keep that in mind. So something else that I feel you can kind of really touch on as well is when it comes to making the food accessible. It's like, oh, but healthy food is boring, but it's not. You can actually, it's knowing how to pair things together while keeping it simple, because you don't need a conglomerate of different food additions to make this glorious dish. Like just pick the protein, just pick the veggies, and actually flavor it with stuff. Like flavor your food, make it simple, put in seasonings, put in herbs, like gamify the food as well. And yeah, you can actually touch on that because you love your food.
I do love my food, yeah. I think in response to anybody who ever tells me that healthy food is boring, it's like my response is you're doing it wrong. And I think a lot of it is down to people aren't really, most people do not have good kitchen skills. And I feel very, very lucky, and I'm probably a bit privileged to have had like a grandmother who I got to cook with when I was younger, and she, you know, basically gave me a love for cooking in the kitchen. And then, you know, I studied home ec when I was in high school as well, and I've always loved cooking. Not everybody has that, okay? And I also realize that not everybody has the opportunity to cook, not everybody has the time. And, you know, like some people, you know, don't even have, funnily enough, some people, I might say this and it might sound funny, some people don't have the equipment for cooking at home, because some people might, you know, be in houses that don't even have a proper kitchen or cooking equipment. But I will say that if it is possible to definitely learn a few very, very easy things to do to help make cooking healthier meals easier. The first thing I would do to say to some people is get a decent cookbook, okay, and get a recommendation for somebody. Here in the UK, there's a very popular series called Pinch of Nom, and that's like pinch of Nom, Nom. which does a lot of like, lower calorie, higher protein recipes from of a lot of different cuisines. And it just makes them very, very easy to produce. And it also focuses on batch cooked meals. And batch cooking is something that I absolutely love because I am incredibly lazy. And I have a number of jobs that keep me busy. So it's really, really difficult for me. I don't want to be spending, all my days and all my afternoons and all my evenings cooking a separate meal. So what I often do is I batch cook on Sundays, and I have meals throughout the week. So for example, like I make things in my slow cooker. And if people haven't had a slow cooker or don't have one, that's probably one of the easiest and the best pieces of cooking equipment people should ever buy, because they're dirt cheap. Like here in the UK, you can pick one up for about £30. And they're quite energy efficient. And literally all you do is you put stuff into it and you turn it on and you come back 6 hours later and it's cooked. So it's great for things like stews. It's great for things like, doing a bolognese if you want to do it like that. It's great for curries. And like you said, it's just a matter of like picking a protein source. So you find like, a nice lean piece of meat or something like that. Or if you want to go with a vegetarian sources, like it's a tofu or corn. I don't know if you have that in the UK, sorry, in Australia. Yeah. And pop in your vegetables, find a seasoning that you like, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel and just like, okay, I'm going to make this fantastic sauce from scratch. You don't need to do that. If you want, like I use like jarred bolognese sauce or things like that all the time, because they're easy and it's mostly tomatoes, which a lot of people don't realize. But a lot of people look at jarred sauce and say, oh, that must be unhealthy. That's not necessarily the case.
This is such a big point to actually touch on. I just want to get you to talk about that more, because a lot of people are just like, oh, I just need to eat really clean, or I don't want to have like tinned ingredients, or it needs to be organic, or BSPs or whatever they're called, BSP, I don't know what they call those, glycerol phosphate, whatever. I don't even pay attention to that shit. It's like, no, you like make shit simple. That stuff isn't ultra processed. That stuff makes shit easier. Get your frozen veggies, have some sauce it out of a can. Like I love tinned tomatoes. I love just normal tomato-based pasta sauces as well. So yeah, maybe hop on that part a little bit more so you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel like Insta.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of clean eating really has messed a lot of people up. And I remember distinctly actually when I did my master's in, I did my master's in Barcelona, and kind of to subsidize while I was living over there, I worked in a bar. And I remember this guy came in and we got talking about food, and he was very drunk. I'm gonna put this out here first just to start a conversation. And he started talking about food and how he was going to go lose weight. And he wasn't going to put anything processed in his body, because anything processed is bad. And if you put some processed food into your body, it's just not good for you. And I'm there as a graduated nutrition student at that point, and I'm just looking at him and I'm just like nodding my head, waiting for my tip at the end of it. And the problem is, though, that's a common mentality, that if you have processed foods, it's automatically bad. And I think that's a terrible way of thinking, because processed foods can be used and included in a overall healthy pattern to help people eat better. And just to give an example of that is, so for example, I cook let's say a meat sauce or a bolognese type sauce fairly regularly in my slow cooker. And all I do is I get some lean beef, I get some vegetables, and sometimes they're frozen. So I get frozen vegetables because they're super convenient and they're already chopped, and I literally just throw them into the pan. And I put them into this big massive pot, and I add in these jarred tomato sauces that are already seasoned. They taste absolutely fantastic. And what I've got here is a massive bowl that's filled with loads and loads of really, really high quality protein, loads and loads of vegetables. And it's got some sauce on it that gives it flavor, that makes it nicer, that makes me want to eat it. And that's adding very, very few calories. And people don't realize that, the contribution of certain foods like that to your total calorie intake is it's very minimal. Most of my energy is coming from the protein, or like whatever whole grains I have with it, or whatever vegetables I have in there. Like it's just a little bit of sauce on the side, and it's making your life easier. It's making your food tastier. And if your life is easier, you're going to do it more often. If your food is tastier, you're going to eat it more often. Why would you not want to make your life easier? And this is something I say to everybody. You do not get any points for making your diet harder than it needs to be. But a lot of people love to do that.
Did you see my tweet that I put up not that long ago on that?
I haven't, I'm afraid. No, sorry.
There's two different tweets I put up. One was you don't get brownie points for losing a lot of weight really, really fast. And the other one was you don't get brownie points for making, I think it was like complicating, making the process harder than it needs to be or something like that. It's like you really don't get brownie points for making it a sufferfest. If anything, that's going to make you become what we spoke about ages ago, the yo-yo dieter who's moving more and more towards the sarcopenic obesity end of the spectrum. And that's not just something that happens in older age. Like it's happening in people who are chronic yo-yo dieters because you're losing muscle mass and you're putting on fat mass. Like make shit easier. And I'm going to put up a reel on this soon where it's just like, instead of thinking of less and like deprivation restriction and what you can't have, think about everything you can add in, because if you're focusing on having all of these delicious foods in a way that actually serves your goals, reducing the amounts of, I will always say this, people have different opinions, reducing the oils, reducing the butters, reducing the creams, reducing the literal sugar, not actual like sugary foods, because you can fit those in, but reducing like that type of high caloric, low density, low satiation stuff, you can actually make really, really big healthy meals, put in a little bit of flavor. You can put in your cheese, reduced fat, like dairy, stuff like that. You can have really big hearty meals and focus on all of this greatness. And more, you'll want less and less of all of that other processed stuff. And you'll be able to fit in more, feel more satisfied, and not have those cravings the same way, because I'm pretty sure you can touch on this as well if you want to, but increasing your amount of protein and increasing the nutrient density of your foods reduces food cravings. And that's something people really don't realize. It's if you're craving shit all the time for sweet foods, it's because you're not eating enough protein, which is satiating. You're not giving yourself enough nutrients to reduce those cravings.
Yeah, so in terms of satiety, yeah, protein definitely is one of the most important macronutrients that we can consume, because it does help to reduce feelings of hunger, and kind of it stops the onset of hunger, that might come later on in the day. So yeah, it's one thing I notice with a lot of people is that they're not consuming enough protein, and then you say, okay, let's focus on that for a moment, and you do that, and people are like, okay, I'm eating a little bit less. I think outside of that, focusing on more unprocessed foods will also help with hunger as well, because so there was a great experiment that was done by a scientist by the name of Kevin Hall a couple of years back. And what they did was basically they gave people a processed food diet, or an ultra processed food diet, I should say. And then they gave them a whole foods diet. And basically they just said, okay, one group, you have the whole foods diet, eat as much as you want. Other group, you've got the ultra processed foods diet, eat as much as you want. And they found that the people eating the ultra processed food diet consumed a vast amount of calories, greater than those eating the whole foods diet. Why? Because one, ultra processed foods are not very satisfying. They don't fill you up. They're low in fiber. They're very quick to digest. They go straight into your system. They're also hyper palatable. That means that they're super delicious, so you want to eat even more. With the whole foods diet, it just takes more work to eat it. They noticed that there was a substantial decrease in the rate that people were eating calories on the whole foods diet, because you have to chew more. If you think, I think a perfect example of an ultra processed food is Nutella. If you give me a jar of Nutella, I can smash that thing down with a spoon in no time at all. But if you give me, some bananas and some nuts, I'm going to be sitting there and chewing for a while, trying to get those calories into my body. That's a kind of a perfect example. Ultra processed foods are just, they're ripe for overconsumption. Whereas processed foods make us eat a little bit less naturally. And that's something that's kind of one of my main reasons for promoting or encouraging people to make the majority of their diet whole food based. Not saying that they have to eliminate ultra processed foods. Like I'm never going to give up ice cream. And if somebody tries to take it away from me, I will fight them. But I think that, if we can reduce the quantity that we have, the proportion that it makes up of our diet, and just to give an example, I'm going to use Australia as an example. I'm going to use the UK. I'm going to use the US. All of those countries have ultra processed food intakes of greater than 50% on average, which means there are some people who are eating far more, like the majority of their diets are made up of ultra processed foods. But if you can bring that down and say like, I'm just throwing out this number, it's completely arbitrary, but you can get that down to maybe 20% or 30%. And the rest of your diet is whole food based. That's going to make you, fuller for longer and more satisfied and want to eat less.
I usually try to say aim for 85-15 or 90-10 versus 80-20 a lot of the time, because people use 80-20 as an excuse to just eat whatever the fuck they want for the 20%. And it's just like, yep, you like the 80-20 principle is showing you that you can actually fit things in. It's not a free pass to just fit whatever you can into your gob, because that has side effects. That has a cascade on satiety on everything else as well. And I like pretty much all of my food. I have some cereal, like a little bit of cereal. That's pretty much my little process thing there. But it's, to me, it's not really about what I can and can't have. I freaking enjoy the food that I eat. I've made it really tasty, and I've made it something I repeat every single day. Like every single day, I don't even change my food. I eat the same thing daily. I love it. And it is full of veggies. It's full of all the vitamins that I need for myself. And it allows me that safety net. Okay, so if I want to go out and eat something out, all I need to do is just whack off one meal and bring in that other meal, and then I'm back to baseline. Whereas a lot of people don't have any structure in what they do. They think everything needs to be a masterpiece of a new meal. Everything needs to look like Fitzpo Jane. Like, no, make shit simple. You don't need to overcomplicate the process. And I don't know whether you noticed it. You probably haven't, because you're deep in your PhD, but there is an influx of people just sharing recipes, sharing meals, sharing how to make all this fancy goop. And I think it's doing a real disservice on a lot of people that already overthink the process, already overthink what they need to be healthy, and they think that every single meal needs to be gobsmackingly amazing. It's like, no, it really doesn't. Like, a lot of the time you don't have time for that shit, and trying to overcomplicate that is what's keeping you stuck in seeing any meaningful benefit. I think that kind of summarizes it all, but I feel like you have a really good way to tie all of this up, because it is something so important that I know you also want to get out: sarcopenic obesity, the fact that muscle mass, protein, and the importance of your food environment. I'm going to say exercise as well, because I didn't mention that. Exercise and cardio and strength training, not cardio or strength training, how they all lead to a more healthy life, and they can actually lead you to the body composition that you want.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to reinvent the wheel here when I say this, but having a healthy, and by healthy I'm talking about generally the most widely accepted form of healthy lifestyle, is going to benefit you long term in terms of your muscle health, and that means exercising regularly. So exercising daily. I genuinely think it's a non-negotiable for people that we should exercise more. Now, I don't mean everybody has to start that, but just exercise more, move more, be more active, and then eat well, and just get a little bit more protein in your diet. And don't reinvent the wheel. Don't overcomplicate it.
I love that last bit. Seriously, stop overcomplicating it. You're making shit harder for yourself. And you really, that's what it said. You don't get brownie points for overcomplicating the process. You really don't. You're, in fact, taking away any chances of true success, because every single time you get overwhelmed, you're back to base one. How can you ever get a home run? Hey, that rhymed. That is so good. There we go. Every single time you overcomplicate the process, you go back to baseline and you can't get a home run. That will be something good to remember. So with that, thank you so much for coming on, Richie. I'm going to put his Instagram bio below. I highly suggest that you go and follow him, and actually don't just click follow. Don't do that. Click it and scroll through his page a little. He has amazing graphs that show you the benefits of just keeping shit simple, like the most simple things of how whole foods actually have more of a metabolic cost to processing than ultra processed foods, aka it actually is healthier for your metabolism. There are so many things on there that I feel will benefit you in your journey, showing you it as a picture, and just some simple takeaways that it really doesn't have to be all that complicated. So seriously, scroll through it, see what you glean from it, and thank you for listening to this podcast, and thank you for coming on, Richie.
Thank you so much for having me, Ruby. A lot of fun. Thank you.